really what is important for people to know, the Santa Ynez Reservoir, which held 117 million gallons of water, was emptied in February. It could have been repaired by employees. It sat empty for 11 months because safety was not a priority. Um, Everyone knows California is a desert climate. Everyone knows about the Santa Ana winds. The reservoir holding over 100 million gallons of water was emptied because there was a tear in the cover. That repair was not expedited, and the decision was made to drain it before the Santa Ana's in the middle of a drought. Further, they did not alert Cal Fire that the reservoir had been emptied, so they were unable to prepare with mitigating arrangements for water in the event of a disaster. And such mitigation efforts, I am told, would have taken a few hours. Had Cal Fire known the reservoir was empty and could not be depended upon, they would have sprung into action with available alternatives. And the untangling of that particular oversight, all roads lead to our elected officials, because it is an LADWP issue, and the LADWP CEO was appointed by Karen Bass, and her priorities were overseen by our elected officials.
And so the head of the LA Department of Water and Power reports to the mayor. So ultimately, that scandal leads back to Bass. John, if I can ask you, are those reports correct that the reservoir near the Palisades was empty because of a tear in the cover, and that the LA Department of Water didn't then go on to tell the LA Fire Department? Is that all true?
It is true, based on all the reporting I have seen and read and familiar with. And it's not just that it was taken offline in February and left that way without notifying fire authorities. According to the reports that I have read, there's no evidence that there was any construction going on. When a reporter went to that site to try to see if there was construction equipment or any evidence of that being an active construction site, they found it essentially abandoned. So it was taken offline, but not only was the construction not expedited, there was no evidence that any construction was even going on there. This is a complete clown show where the right hand is not talking to the left hand. And at no point did anyone in any position of authority go, hey, this isn't a good idea, including, by the way, 10 days before the fire started, when they were notified that these Santa Ana winds would be absolutely devastating or potentially devastating, and the fire risk was through the roof. Instead of leaping into action and trying to make sure that they were as prepared as possible, what did Karen Bass do? She gets on a plane and she goes to a diplomatic mission in Ghana, where she's at a cocktail party posing for pictures with all of these international figures while the Pacific Palisades was burning.
John, the fire started on the 7th of January in the Palisades. What day did she get on that plane to go to Ghana?
It was before that. The key date, though, was the warning. The moment that she was told about these winds, the moment that she was told about the fire risk, that's when she knew her priority was in Los Angeles. She claims that she was available by telephone the entire time she was in Africa. Okay, well then why weren't you on the telephone when the Pacific Palisades was burning? Why were you sipping cocktails, taking pictures with people? And believe me, I'm a frequent flyer. If you're relying on American Airlines internet to communicate with people on the ground, you're really playing Russian roulette with 5 bullets in the chamber.
Fair enough. Just go back to the point about the reservoir. A water management expert we spoke to said, yes, it is important to have those reservoirs full, but in actual fact, it wouldn't have made a tremendous amount of difference to the firefighting efforts. Can someone come in and challenge that, please? Yeah, go ahead, Sofia.
My question for our officials would be simply and only, would 100 million gallons of water at the beginning of the fire, immediately at the beginning of the fire, have helped? No official can answer no to that question. I don't care what spin they're putting on it. And as my colleague here mentioned, they're saying that this reservoir was sitting empty. They're blaming a bid requirement. First of all, that's false. the CEO of the DWP has the ability to sign off on expenditures under a certain dollar amount. I believe that amount is $5 million. This was a $100,000 repair. So that is false. Also, again, it was clearly not a priority, because priorities will be dealt with in a timely fashion. It would have taken 30 days if it were a priority, not 11 months. And the reality is, when you're wanting to talk about her, Mayor Bass, being gone and not being prepared for this, again, it comes down to her having known the liabilities that exist. These are individuals who have histories that would indicate that they have an awareness of the intersection between electricity, fire and fire preparedness, and wind and California.
Sophia, that's quite detailed analysis of the cover there. None of the experts we spoke to had that to hand. Are those numbers well sourced and reliable? Sorry to ask, but I think it's necessary.
That is from the DWP. Yes. The bid was for 100. Originally, the DWP put out a request for the bid at $89,000, and they settled on a firm for $130,000. And they're blaming this bid requirement, which, again, it's deck chairs on the Titanic. There is no bid requirement for under a certain amount. The CEO could have simply signed off on that. And in fact, the union stated that the repair could have and should have been done by employees, by department employees.
John,
but if they're going to blame the bid was a ridiculously low amount. They've spent more money in public outreach for a silly ad for the Dodgers. So the idea that this was an 11-month delay requirement is absurd.
John, we spoke to the communications director, if you like, for CAL FIRE, David Acuna, and he said they had plenty of water. He played down any such concerns about water supplies. Have you been talking to anybody in the LA Fire Department who's perhaps given you something off the record that you could share with us?
Well, it was the firefighters on the line who were there who said that there was no water. I mean, that's initially where the reports came from. And I'll say this, that the local authorities have given so many different explanations as to just exactly what happened with the lack of water and whether or not that impacted their ability to fight the fire, that Gavin Newsom has launched an investigation at the state level to find out exactly what happened. Now, every bias that he has is to say that this worked like a Swiss clock. We did everything we could. There was nothing else that could have been done to help us fight this fire. But even Gavin Newsom recognizes that these conflicting statements that the locals are making are a problem. And he is trying to create separation between him and the local authorities, including the mayor, Karen Bass, on this subject, if and when he decides to throw them under the bus and turn on them. When he was asked this specific question that you just asked me, and I think it was Meet the Press, he said, well, I'm not the mayor of Los Angeles, meaning it's not my problem. It's not under my jurisdiction. Go talk to someone else. Don't blame me.
Just on the matter of the governor and the mayor, John, can you just give me your depiction of the two of them for our global audience who don't know them?
Well, Gavin Newsom is a governor who identifies as a president. And Karen Bass is a woman who was on the short list to be vice president for Joe Biden. And it wasn't until Kamala Harris and her political team here in California kneecapped her so that Kamala Harris could then be the vice president and Karen Bass would have to find something else to do. What we essentially have here is we have two absentee landlords. Gavin Newsom wants to be president of the United States. He believes that dealing with local and state issues are beneath him. They're parochial. They're for someone else to deal with. He is a man who wants to deal in presidential politics, world affairs, issues of consequence, and these are issues that are not something that are worth his time. Karen Bass is someone who thought that she was going to be the vice president of the United States. Becoming mayor of Los Angeles was the consolation prize. The reason that she's going on these international diplomatic missions is because that's where she sees herself. It's not just her going, by the way, to Africa to the inauguration of the president of Ghana. She's been going to Paris back and forth, right and left, because Los Angeles will be hosting the Olympics in 2028. And she says she's doing research because Paris was the last host city for the Olympics. She's been living her life on the plane, going to these international destinations instead of dealing with all of the festering problems that we deal with on a regular basis here in Los Angeles. We have people who are in charge who are simply not interested in doing the job.